All right, welcome everyone. I am joined today by the wonderful Dina Doll. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing well, a little bit tired. I had a week in DC, but I just want to start off by getting to know you a little bit. We've never chatted before, so let's just start with a few fundamental questions. Can you tell me your journey towards becoming a lawyer and then your journey towards becoming a lawyer that makes content?
Yeah. So, I did not come from a family of lawyers. My dad is an immigrant to this country. Worked for the government his whole life. My mom is a nurse. I'll go to law school and we'll see what happens. And I majored in journalism, which is kind of partly how I then kind of combine this to become a legal analyst, because my first love has always been the news and informing people. So I went to USC journalism school and then went on to law school. And it's funny, you go into law school and you think, what kind of lawyer am I going to be afterwards? Like public defender, nonprofit, this. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I have all these school loans. What is the best job I can get to pay off these school loans? And that's, so I went to a big law firm here in Los Angeles, took time off when I had my kids. I always think like women should be able to have any choice they want. And that was the choice I wanted. So I have a big gap in my resume, but I'm totally don't regret that at all. Started a firm with my husband, who was also a lawyer we met in law school. And then when I decided, okay, I have time to work again. What do I want to do? I was like, I've always loved the legal analyst work. And so because it combines the two, because at the end of the day, I truly believe that power is knowledge. Knowledge is power. And the law applies to all of us. We all have a right to understand the law. And the law is not complicated. If somebody tries to tell you in a way that makes it so it sounds complicated, they're just not telling it to you very well. What's complicated are people. The facts of the cases are what is complicated, and you have to apply the law to these facts of the case. So to me, this is it's like doing something that I love doing. Like I would do it as a hobby. I love it that much.
Yeah, it is absolutely great. And that's true that the law can be simple. And then it's the interactions between the actors that often get really, really complicated. Ben Meiselas teaches law, right? And he posted a LinkedIn post less than a week ago saying that he teaches negotiation and that Trump's negotiation tactics are not at all what he would teach.
When both parties are looking to make money out of a deal, they try to be pleasant in their negotiations, let's say. Everyone's like very nice about it. Like, oh, how about we do this or we do that? Because you don't want to like kill the deal, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there's also negotiations when the parties are suing each other, but they're trying to settle. And those get super ugly. And it's all about like, you did this and you do that. And the parties don't talk for days and then they get back together. And that's like really ugly stuff. I think Trump, I don't even know if he negotiates. That's the thing, right? He just kind of thinks that like he can just say something and people will do something. And we're seeing with the ports closing, he's not doing it at all. But I guess, I don't know. I guess in my with my age, let's say, Adam, and experience, I just think being transparent, clear, and simple is the best way to negotiate. Like just in general in life, like this is what you first have to be clear with what your own parameters are. I'll put it that way, because sometimes people don't actually even know what they want, right? Like sometimes even with a lawsuit, like what they want is for their life to get resolved because of that dispute, where nobody wins in a lawsuit. Yeah. Even if you quote win, like in this example, right, where you had to deal with the cameraman and he took the money. And even if you got it back, you lost that time and energy and stress you will never get back. So sometimes, and the reason why people are so unreasonable in a settlement, in a litigation, is because of like the emotions around it. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really clear about what you want, first of all. And if you're clear about what you want, it's much easier to negotiate, because if you're just like going in and just like, wanting to destroy the other person, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, which is what Trump wants to do. He's like reverse negotiating when it comes to Ukraine. There's ways to give Ukraine leverage with security guarantees and with weaponry, and he's losing Ukraine leverage actively, but that's a side story. Speaking about being clear with what you want up front, like being personally assertive is something that this is like business therapy, by the way. We're doing business therapy right now.
I love it. So
being personally assertive is something that I've been working on over the past year, and I can feel it starting to come together. Because there was a while where it's a really interesting dynamic. I can be very assertive at a Trump rally because I feel like I'm knowledgeable, I'm quick on my feet or whatever. But sometimes in these meetings or business discussions, I wouldn't be as personally assertive. And my language, even, my mom's an industrial organizational psychologist. You would really like her. She's cool. She's great. Awesome. And she always is helping me reframe how I'm saying stuff. So I would say something to the effect of, would it be okay if we consider doing this? And she's like, no. Don't ask, would it be okay? Be assertive. Say, how about we do this? Or something that's more assertive like that. So yeah, any advice on being personally assertive in that regard? I guess that's.
Oh my gosh. I know, Adam, you can give it to me too. It's not easy asking for what we want, right? At all. Because if the thing is, if we want it that badly, then it's hard to let it go. And, I think it's, it comes down to, we can get really deep psychologically, but it's like, even like as a woman, right? Like, I feel like I always kind of have to like prove, even in this legal analyst thing, it was like, I have to prove that like I have the right experience or I have the right credibility. Like you sometimes feel like you always have to prove yourself. And oddly, if I'm not personally assertive about what I'm okay with or what I'm asking for, I'm actually going to be disrespected more. That's the interesting thing. When you come at it from a place of, oh, please, can you give me this? That person's more likely to say no, right? So, I think it's a work in progress for everybody, to be honest. I think it's a work in progress because sometimes like our dreams, we're too afraid of maybe going for or thinking that somebody else likes our dream as much as our dream. But I think the practice makes perfect, and knowing that like you're worth it and you got to just go for it. And it's amazing your mom has that coaching language.
All right. I guess this is a good opportunity to show you this clip of my debate on Jubilee. I flew out to LA to record this about 2 weeks ago. And this is about due process. I want you to let me know what you think about what I said after. Watch me explain to this MAGA voter why Trump's illegal deportations are truly terrifying. Watch until the end.
So what you're saying is that everybody gets all the rights under the Constitution. We have to apply our Constitution to everybody of the world.
In the U.S., the Constitution specifically says that all persons in the United States have due process. Now, the framers put persons rather than citizens because it's not just citizens who deserve due process. All persons in the United States deserve due process. This has been upheld by multiple Supreme Court rulings. So what you're arguing for is creating a new class of people within America that have no due process whatsoever. What happens when you create a new class with no due process? You can justify putting anyone into that new class. What if I said that you were a gang member and I never gave you the chance to even defend yourself? Then boom, we deport you, and then I'm debating some MAGA person next month and they're like, oh, but Aldo was an MS-13 gang member. Like, you think that everybody should, obviously this is a bad example, but you get where I'm going, right? If you remove due process from one person, you can remove due process from anybody.
Again, deporting a person that crossed the border illegally is not a mistake.
Against a withholding order of removal.
If he was deported to a country other than El Salvador,
that would have been fine. That would have been illegal.
You would be fine with that?
The administrative error was them being deported. If he got due process, then sure. But the reason that he got deported to El Salvador is because they didn't give him the due process to figure out that there was a withholding order of removal.
So throughout this argument, the dude kept saying that it doesn't matter. If he's here illegally, then he's here illegally. But due process applies to everybody here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And our laws apply to everybody here. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a tourist here and you commit a crime, it's not like, hey, I'm not a citizen. See ya. You're going to go through our courts. You're going to go to our prison. I mean, I remember in college, everybody would talk about like which countries, they were going to travel to. And there was always a certain countries that would have those scary stories, right? Of a college kid getting arrested for having some possession of something and then thrown in jail, right? For 50 years or whatever, because of their laws being more strict, their due process not being as thorough, let's say. So the same applies to people here in this country. Like our laws, our justice system, including our due process, applies to you if you're here.
Can you explain the difference between substantive and procedural due process?
Yeah, so I think that the difference really is okay, I know that's a good question. I mean, I would say the difference is between whether or not, I think they're both basically the same thing, but procedural due process is how maybe it's like effectuated in the courts in terms of, if you're going to have a court hearing, let's say, right? Or the right to a defense attorney or something like that. Whereas the substantive due process is more just like over your person. You can't we can't have like your person or your property like infringed upon without due process.
Going back a little bit to Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, how would you describe or explain to a Trump supporter who's making these arguments that, hey, not only do they not care that he was removed, like they honestly have been biting the bullet now. They haven't been saying that he was deported legally. They say, okay, he was deported illegally, but we have to start doing that because what are we going to hold 15 million court hearings is the argument that I've heard multiple times. How would you summarize this case and the lack of due process given?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it starts and ends with they admitted they made a mistake.
Yep.
Like
that's it.
They made a mistake.
Yeah.
I don't know why we even move on from that, to be honest, because the rest of it doesn't matter. They've actually already admitted it. I mean, this whole due process thing, I didn't think we would ever be in this situation where we're arguing about whether or not people are entitled to due process. I mean, you talk about like legal principles. Due process is the fundamental principle, and not just in criminal law. I feel like I've been hearing a lot about that, like how Trump was entitled to due process because of his criminal law. And people are very familiar with the due process with criminal, right? Because we have so many protections for criminal defendants in this country. But due process is, without due process, there is no law. Yeah. It is the bedrock of our legal system, and not just in the criminal. We're talking about civil lawsuits. If you get sued, you have to have it served upon you. So that way, you're getting sued. That's called due process. You have a certain amount of days to respond to that. That's due process. If you have a speeding ticket, you have a court hearing that you can go and, contest that speeding. Even a parking ticket, on the back of the parking ticket, you have a place you can appeal that parking ticket. Every single aspect of the law that touches a person in the United States has due process, period. So there was not a surprise that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in favor of due process, because that is literally their jobs. They would be ruling against their own job to say that due process didn't exist. Our law really wouldn't exist, because then you could do anything you wanted at any time. You wouldn't have to have, like if you were suing somebody, you wouldn't even have to show them the lawsuit. You could just show up to the judge, and the judge could just decide on their own and not have a trial and not have a jury. I mean, all of that is due process, right? So
yeah, due process can even be as simple as like an immigrant getting a notice in the mail before something, right? That can be due process. It doesn't even have to be a court hearing, because JD Vance was the one who originally made this argument on Twitter. He said, Democrats are expecting 15 million court hearings, and this is an abuse of U.S. resources. So, of course, we're going to have to expedite it. But that's never the argument anyone ever made. No one wants 15 million court hearings. In fact, I've even heard that President Obama played it pretty fast and loose with his deportations, but never once did he just not allow due process. So I guess the question that I'm trying to ask is, are Trump's Is it the speed of Trump's due process and the lack of even a notice in the mail? Is he playing this game? It's sort of like heads I win, tails you lose, where you don't have the chance to file a habeas petition before or get due process because he'll say it's premature, or they don't give you enough time, or they send the notice in the mail. I think Michael Popak was saying sometimes they'll send it in English rather than Spanish or something. And then after they get deported, the Trump admin says, we don't have the jurisdiction to bring you back. There's no habeas petition here. So is Trump's speed affecting the due process?
I think yes, although I don't even think that, well, and yes, and the Supreme Court basically slowed him down with that when they said, they decided kind of on the procedural issue that, now this is not with Abrego Garcia, but the entire plane load of people that they had to file habeas corpus petitions in Texas, right? But they really did say in that opinion, you need to give them a chance. So yeah, there's more than one thing that's going on with Trump. It's one, just not even giving them a chance. And then two, you can't just like tell them as they're going on the plane. You have to give them a chance to be able to find a lawyer, file the habeas corpus petition to begin with. And that is part of due process also, like giving somebody a period of time to be able to respond. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to shift topics a little bit. I feel like I've asked you a bunch of questions on different topics, but I do want to ask about the law firms that recently have sort of caved to Trump to do pro bono work. Why do you think they decided to cave? One of my MAGA friends was asking me, wouldn't they just band together and sue Trump back? I don't know. Can you explain the flaw in that thinking? Why did they cave?
So flawed. The law firm that I worked at has not been named yet, so I'm almost not talking about them that much. But they are up there in terms of the size and frankly, who they've represented. They've had one of their partners, represented the Supreme Court case for the same-sex marriage. Another partner represented, if you remember when Jim Jordan was going after the former prosecutor in New York when they were going through the Trump criminal fraud trial there, and he defended the New York prosecutors. So he's got to be in there. This firm has to be in their sights. But anyway, it's money. Okay, let's just be frank about it. The first one happened and they said they were losing clients because they were not only targeting the firm, they were basically saying that any of their clients could have their national security revoked. And that's a really big deal. Like, for example, there is a friend of mine and he works for like a mining company. That would mean like they could not go through like the environmental agency's doors, right? This is really severe stuff. These big firms, they're representing the Northrop Grummans of the world who need security clearance. Like they could not literally work for their clients. So they panicked. I think it was a panic move. They just immediately went to their bottom line and caved. But they're seeing what happens when you cave to somebody like Trump because they thought a flimsy piece of paper that they signed with Trump saying, sure, we're going to give you pro bono hours. We're going to throw some junior associates your way, but we get to decide what the topics are. That's the contracts that they put into this deal with Trump was that the firms, okay, well, now we know what's happening. Trump is already signing an executive order saying that these big firms need to represent law enforcement officers in misconduct cases. These firms don't want to go anywhere near that kind of stuff. And so they're seeing the pain of capitulating because one, they've lost all credibility. One of the big firms has already talked about how they're losing recruiting, because attorneys who can get to these big firms have their pick of firms. It's kind of like the Harvard and Columbia's, these same students are going to these different schools. So these big firms are losing now attorneys. And at the same time, Trump's treating them now as their personal law firm. So they're either going to have to go along with his crazy assignments or sue him like they did, like the other firms did. So they've lost their credibility and then also end up in a legal suit with him. So it was a bad idea, but it's just about the money.
It's about the money. And is this a good example of the chilling effect where you attack one entity and then other entities sort of begin to cave preemptively? Like you can see the same thing with Harvard. well, Harvard didn't cave, but Columbia did, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then other colleges were probably preemptively thinking maybe we should think about giving into these demands. It's the same thing with law firms, same thing with media companies. We've heard Paramount, or the parent company, or Paramount is a parent company of 60 Minutes, and they've been kind of trying to put their thumb on the scale because Trump and his admin have to approve a deal. So that's a prime example of the chilling effect, where authoritarianism doesn't even have to be cops putting guns in the faces of CNN anchors. I see a lot of people in my comments thinking that like we're close to that point, like Russia. No. It's not about putting guns in the face of journalists. It can be a lot more subtle than that, like authoritarianism creeping in through the chilling effect. Is that correct?
100%. I mean, and that is so happening like across the board. The number of media companies that just gave him millions of dollars in settlements right off the bat after he lost was so disturbing, with ABC doing it and, you know, Zuckerberg, of course, doing it. And now what we're going to see with 60 Minutes. But no, and it's a real thing. I was talking to somebody the other day who wanted to do more political legal analyst work, and his law firm didn't want him to do it, you know, because of Trump. I mean, it's happening in the small levels that we're not talking about, and the large levels. And that is exactly how you control people, is making people obey in advance. And you know, maybe, I don't know what you think about this, Adam, but I feel like part of us, maybe we are a little bit responsible as a country, because I feel like we have made our president, maybe we have given him, a president, too much deference. You know what I mean? Like we pride ourselves on not having a monarchy, but then we do want to have this celebrity, like bigger than life president, right? Like you look at South Korea and what happened, right? How the prime minister there was like convicted or something in like 2 weeks after he called martial law back in December. Like they acted quickly. I don't think we would ever do that here, even if it wasn't for Trump. Like we have had this like romanticized vision of a president, and that combination with Trump, who completely abuses the power we've given him, is kind of created this monster. But I feel like if we were like, let's look like Bush. Bush and Cheney's lied to the world, right, about the Iraq weapons of mass destruction, and got like no consequence for it, right? Like we are willing to give a pass to our presidents in a way that I don't think other countries are with their prime ministers. And I think we're seeing the combination of that, where maybe in the past the presidents deserved some of that. Right? We're more, more deserving of it. And with Trump, we're seeing that in a combination. I don't know what you think about that. Have you thought about that at all?
I think it's a very, very good point that Trump is downstream from decades of, I don't know, would you say American exceptionalism, or not exceptionalism, but like the allowance of American exceptionalism running rampant on the global stage. But I definitely think it's an interesting theory. And I really appreciate your time, by the way. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, they can find me on Ask Dina Doll. I mean, they can find me in MeidasTouch, of course. Oh, yeah. I'm putting out videos all the time on MeidasTouch. I'm putting out videos on Legal AF, the sister channel, and Popok and I have an unprecedented show that's just focused on the Supreme Court, speaking of the Supreme Court. And then I'm on Ask Dina Doll throughout all the social media platforms.
What's unprecedented about your show with Popok?
Yeah, so it's just the Supreme Court. Every week, we talk about the Supreme Court, and it's about the big cases. And then there's some smaller cases that don't always get talked about. There's so much right now in the news, but we're following all that like Christian nationalist cases that are in front of Trump, and I'm in front of the court. And then next week, the May 15th is the oral argument for the birthright citizenship and national injunctions. And we're going to do a live on that May 15th.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll do it again soon.
That sounds great.